There is a specific kind of tired that sleep does not fix, not the tired that comes from a long week or a bad night or a season of life where too many things demanded too much at once. That tired has a solution: rest, time, a weekend with nothing scheduled, and it lifts. You return to yourself more or less intact. This is different. This is the tired that lives somewhere behind your eyes on a Tuesday afternoon when nothing dramatic has happened and no one has done anything wrong, and you cannot explain to anyone, including yourself, why you feel like you have been running a marathon that started years ago and no one told you where the finish line was. This is the tired that sits with you in the car after a conversation where someone you love needed something from you and you gave it, genuinely, without resentment, and somehow you still drove home feeling emptied out in a way you cannot justify because you were not even asked for anything unusual. They just needed you, the way they always need you, the way everyone always needs you. And you were there, because you are always there. That is not a complaint. You are not looking for sympathy, and you are not, despite what some people would assume, secretly angry at the people you love. You would do it all again. You know you would. That is not the problem. The problem, the one no one is going to name for you unless someone is honest enough to say it directly, is that being the person everyone leans on has a cost that is almost never acknowledged. Not because the people in your life are careless, but because the cost is invisible. Because you are very, very good at absorbing it without showing the seams. And you have been absorbing it for so long that you have started to confuse the exhaustion with your personality. This video is not for everyone. If you move through the world lightly, if other people's emotions roll off you without leaving a residue, if you have never once driven home from a gathering and spent the next hour quietly processing everything that went unsaid in every conversation, this will not land the way it is meant to. But if you have ever found yourself nodding along in a conversation while internally managing not just your own emotional response, but also the other person's, and also the emotional atmosphere of the room, and also the gap between what is being said and what is actually true, then stay here. Because the 7 signs you are about to hear are not a diagnosis, they are a mirror. And most people who need this mirror have been avoiding their own reflection for a very long time. If you enjoy learning the hidden psychology behind human behavior, manipulation, confidence, and emotional intelligence, subscribe now. Because the people who understand human nature are usually the people least controlled by it. Before the signs. Before any of that, there is something that needs to be said about why this happens in the first place. Because understanding the mechanism does not just explain the exhaustion, it completely reframes where it comes from. And that reframe is the difference between spending another year managing symptoms and actually understanding what is underneath them. Here is what the research tells us, and it is worth sitting with. Psychologists who study what is called empathic overarousal, the technical term for what happens in the nervous system of highly sensitive, highly caring people during extended emotional labor, have found something that is both validating and sobering. The brains of people who experience high empathic resonance do not just cognitively understand what others are feeling. They simulate it neurologically. The regions of the brain associated with felt emotional experience activate in response to other people's emotional states in a way that is functionally similar to actually experiencing those states yourself. In other words, when someone you love is in pain, your nervous system is not just observing their pain and generating an intellectual response. It is running the pain, not at full volume, not identically, but structurally, in the same regions, using the same circuitry. And that means that for every person in your life who is struggling, every conversation that carries unspoken weight, every relationship where you are the stable one, the available one, the one who holds it together, your nervous system is doing work that theirs is doing, plus yours. You are not just carrying your own emotional load. You are carrying a proportional fraction of everyone else's. Continuously, without a clear mechanism for setting it down. Now think about what that costs over months, over years, over a lifetime of being someone who genuinely, deeply, structurally cannot be in the presence of another person's pain without being moved by it. The exhaustion is not a character flaw. It is a predictable outcome of a specific and entirely real neurological process operating without adequate maintenance. And the fact that no one around you can see it. The fact that you look fine, that you perform fine, that by every visible metric you are managing just as well as everyone else, does not mean it is not happening. It means you are very good at hiding the cost of a process that never fully stops. Sign 1. You feel more relief when plans get canceled than disappointment. This one tends to arrive quietly, without announcement. At some point, and you may not be able to identify exactly when, the ratio shifted. The prospect of a social event, even one involving people you genuinely love, stopped feeling like something to look forward to and started feeling like something to get through. And when the message comes, the cancellation, the reschedule, the change of plans, something in you exhales. Not with guilt, necessarily, or maybe with guilt, but underneath the guilt, undeniably, there is relief. Pure and immediate and slightly alarming in its intensity. Here is what that relief is telling you. It is not telling you that you have become antisocial. It is not evidence that you secretly dislike the people in your life or that you have given up on connection. What it is telling you is that your nervous system has been running a resource calculation, quietly, continuously, without your conscious participation. And it has determined that the cost of one more interaction currently exceeds your available reserves. That calculation is not irrational. It is accurate. Your nervous system is not catastrophizing. It is reporting conditions as they exist. The sign to take seriously is not the relief itself. The sign to take seriously is when the relief starts happening with the people who matter most to you. When you feel relieved that your closest friend canceled. When the prospect of time with your partner starts carrying a weight it never used to. When even the relationships you chose most deliberately, the ones that matter most, start feeling like obligation more than nourishment. That is not who you are. That is what sustained, unacknowledged emotional exhaustion does to the relationships of someone who cares too much for too long without replenishment. Sign 2. You can feel other people's moods before they say a single word, and you are already managing them before the conversation starts. There is a version of this that feels like a gift, and for most of your life it probably has been. You walk into a room and you know immediately and accurately what is happening beneath the surface. Who is upset and trying not to show it? Who is performing fine? Who is one poorly timed comment away from a conversation no one at the table is prepared for? You know all of this before anyone has said anything. And you adjust. You have always adjusted. Seamlessly, automatically, so naturally that most people have no idea it is happening, including you, much of the time. But here is what the adjustment costs at the level of the nervous system. Managing your behavior in response to another person's emotional state requires active cognitive regulation. It requires you to monitor their state, run a predictive model of how they might respond to various inputs, modify your own behavior accordingly, and monitor the outcomes of those modifications in real time, all while also having the conversation on the surface level that everyone else thinks is the only conversation happening. Neuroscience researchers have a term for this kind of simultaneous multi-level processing, cognitive load. And cognitive load has a ceiling. When you operate near or above that ceiling for extended periods, for an entire dinner party, for an entire workday, for an entire relationship where the emotional dynamics require constant calibration, the cumulative cost is measurable in cortisol levels, in decision fatigue, in the specific kind of mental fog that descends in the evenings and will not quite lift regardless of how early you go to bed. The gift is real, but a gift that operates without limits, without boundaries, without any mechanism for switching off, eventually becomes indistinguishable from a burden. And the people around you, the ones whose moods you have been quietly absorbing and managing for years, many of them have never once had to manage yours. Sign 3. You apologize for having needs. Pay attention to this one, because it tends to be so normalized, so deeply embedded in the behavioral pattern, that most people who do it have stopped registering it as something that happens. It sounds like this. Someone asks if you are okay, and you say yes before you have actually checked. You are offered something. Help, support, space to talk about something you are carrying. And your first response is to minimize what you need so that giving it to you requires as little as possible from the other person. You find yourself prefacing requests with, "I'm sorry to ask but," or "I don't want to bother you," or that specific formulation that is so common it has become invisible. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. 4 words that contain, if you look closely enough, an entire architecture of self-erasure. Because when you say it, you are not always lying. You genuinely do not want to be a burden. You genuinely would rather absorb the discomfort than ask someone to take on even a fraction of it for you. And somewhere along the line, through accumulated experience, through being the strong one, through being the person others came to rather than the person who went to others, you developed a belief so quiet and so constant that it barely registers as a belief anymore. The belief that your needs are an imposition, that what you require is too much, that asking for it will cost something that you are not entitled to ask other people to pay. And the exhaustion that belief produces is not the exhaustion of doing too much. It is the exhaustion of never being fully received, of being present for everyone and fully present for no one, including yourself. Sign 4. You replay conversations long after they are over, worrying about whether you said the right thing. It is late. The conversation ended hours ago. By any reasonable measure, it went fine. No one was hurt. Nothing was left unresolved. And yet, you are still in it, running the transcript, examining the moment you said that one thing and wondering whether the pause that followed meant what you thought it meant or something else entirely. Reconstructing the other person's facial expression at the point where you were honest about something and trying to determine, from memory, whether they were genuinely okay with it or whether they were managing their response for your benefit. This is not anxiety in the clinical sense, though it can look like it from the outside, and it can coexist with it. What it actually is, in most cases, is the downstream consequence of caring so precisely and so continuously about other people's inner experience that you cannot fully leave a social interaction until you have determined, to your own satisfaction, that no one was made worse by your presence in it. That is a profound and genuinely beautiful quality. The world contains far too few people who care that much about the impact they have on others. But it is also a quality that, without appropriate self-compassion, becomes a trap. Because the check you are performing, the post-conversation audit, can never fully close. There is always one more thing to examine, one more ambiguity to resolve, one more moment that could mean either of two things, and you do not know which, and you will not know, and you cannot stop trying to know. And the energy that audit consumes, the hours of your interior life spent in conversations that technically ended, is energy that cannot be spent anywhere else, cannot be spent on rest, cannot be spent on your own thoughts, cannot be spent on the work of knowing yourself because you are perpetually occupied with the work of analyzing everyone else. Sign 5, you have forgotten what you actually want, not what everyone else needs, but what you want. This one is the hardest to name when it is happening to you. It does not arrive dramatically. It does not announce itself. It accumulates slowly across years, across thousands of small moments where someone else's preference took priority over yours. Not because they demanded it, but because deferring came more naturally than asking for what you actually wanted. And at some point, the mechanism that generates the answer to the question, "What do I want?" gets so rarely consulted that it starts to run slowly, to produce uncertain outputs, to leave you standing in the middle of a restaurant holding a menu, genuinely unable to decide what you want for dinner, and feeling a disproportionate distress about that inability that has nothing to do with food. Psychologists who study chronic caretakers, people whose relational identity is organized around meeting others' needs, have noted something specific about this phenomenon. It is not that these people lack preferences. It is that they have been systematically, often unconsciously, discounting their preferences in favor of others for long enough that the discounting has become automatic. The preference arises, and before it reaches conscious awareness, a filter applies. Is this preference going to be inconvenient? Is it going to require me to assert myself in a way that might make someone else uncomfortable? Is it going to make me difficult? If the answer is yes to any of those questions, the preference gets set aside. So reliably, so automatically, so consistently, that eventually the preferences themselves start arriving quietly, tentatively, like guests who are not sure they are welcome, until they stop arriving at all. And you find yourself organizing your life around what everyone else needs, while somewhere underneath the relentless generosity and the genuine love and the absolute real commitment to the people you care about, there is a version of you that has not been asked what they want in a very long time. And that version is tired in a way that has nothing to do with overwork and everything to do with invisibility. Sign 6. Kindness from other people makes you cry in ways you cannot explain. This one almost never appears on any list. It is too specific, too strange on the surface, too difficult to describe without sounding like something is wrong. But if you have experienced it, and if you are someone who has been caring too much for too long, you probably have, you know exactly what it is. Someone does something unexpectedly kind. It does not have to be large. A coworker who noticed you were struggling and quietly handled something without being asked. A friend who remembered a small detail you mentioned months ago. A stranger who held a door for you on a day when everything felt heavy, and the gesture, for reasons you could not immediately explain, made your eyes fill with tears before you could stop them. And the cry that follows, if it follows, is not sadness. It is not even gratitude exactly. It is something closer to recognition, like a part of you that has been waiting a very long time to be seen, to be received, to be on the receiving end of the kind of attention you give to everyone else, finally got a fragment of it. And the fragment was enough to break something open. That response is not weakness. It is not an overreaction. What it is, and this is important enough to say slowly, is the emotional response of a person whose giving has far, far outpaced their receiving, for long enough that even small acts of care register as overwhelming because they are, relative to the drought, almost impossibly generous. You have been so consistently the one who gives that you have almost forgotten what it feels like to receive. And when it happens, the response is not proportional to the gesture. It is proportional to everything that came before it. To every time you swallowed your own need, every time you held someone else's weight, every time you said it's fine when it was not entirely fine. The cry is not about the kind moment. The cry is about all the moments before it. Sign 7. You feel guilty for not doing more, even when you have already given everything. This is the final sign, and it is the most damaging, not because it is the most painful, but because it is the most self-perpetuating. It is the sign that keeps the cycle running long after any rational observer would have recognized that the cycle needed to stop. You have given a lot. By any reasonable measure, you have given more than your share. You have been available when being available cost you. You have shown up when showing up meant setting something of your own aside. You have held space for people who did not know how to hold space for themselves, and you have done it without announcing it, without requiring acknowledgement, because that is not why you did it. And yet, in the quiet, after the giving, there is a persistent voice that does not offer you the acknowledgement you never required from others. A voice that inventories what you did not do, who you did not call, whose text you have not yet answered, who might be struggling right now in a way that your presence might have mitigated, who might need you in ways you have not yet thought to offer. The guilt is not occasional. It is structural. It does not require a specific failure to activate. It activates in the absence of failure, in the presence of enough capacity, enough energy, enough time, enough attention, that the voice determines you could be doing something for someone else right now, and you are not. And here is what the research tells us about chronic guilt in high empathy individuals, and it is direct enough that it bears saying without softening. Guilt is functional when it alerts you to an actual transgression. When you have done something that conflicts with your values, guilt is a signal worth following. It tells you something is misaligned. Address the misalignment and the guilt resolves. But the guilt that comes from simply not having infinite capacity is not functional. It does not resolve when addressed because there is no transgression to address. There is only the boundary of what one human being can give. A boundary that is real, that is legitimate, that is not a moral failure, being repeatedly treated as evidence of a moral failure. And every time you respond to that guilt by pushing past your own limit, giving more, being available more, ignoring the signal from your nervous system that says this particular resource is depleted, you teach yourself one more iteration of the same lesson. That your limits are not real, that the cost of caring does not count, that the exhaustion is not data, it is weakness, and weakness is not something you are permitted. That lesson is wrong. It has always been wrong. And it is costing you something you are not going to get back. Now here is the part that most content like this carefully avoids, because it is more complicated than the rest, and it requires something more than validation to receive properly. Knowing the signs is not enough. Understanding the mechanism is not enough. Recognizing yourself in all 7 of them, feeling that specific, slightly breathless recognition of being described accurately for the first time, that is a meaningful moment, but it is not a solution. It is a beginning. The question that follows the recognition is the one that actually determines what happens next. And the question is not, how do I stop caring so much? That question is built on the wrong premise. The caring is not the problem. The caring is the most important thing about you, and trying to flatten it, trying to build a wall between yourself and other people's pain, trying to become someone who moves through the world without absorbing it, will cost you something that the exhaustion itself never could. The question is, what does caring look like when it is sustainable? Because sustainable caring is not smaller caring. It is not reduced caring. It is not guarded or withheld or delivered from behind protective distance. Sustainable caring is caring that includes yourself in its radius, that treats your own capacity, your own needs, your own emotional landscape with the same quality of attention you have always given to everyone else's. That sounds simpler than it is. For someone who has spent years running the empathic operating system at maximum capacity without maintenance, the instruction to care for yourself the way you care for others arrives with a significant translation problem. Because the way you care for others is precise, continuous, deeply attuned to subtle signals, and organized around their specific needs in their specific moments. Doing that for yourself requires first knowing what you actually need, which requires first making space for the question, which requires first quieting the voice that says there are more important things to attend to right now, other people who need more urgently, and your needs are, once again, an imposition on the larger project of being available. That voice is not your conscience. It is not wisdom. It is the accumulated residue of a pattern that has been running without challenge for a long time, and patterns that run without challenge tend to masquerade as truth. The truth is this: your capacity to care for others, the genuine, rare, biologically real depth of it, does not renew automatically. It requires conditions. The same way sleep requires darkness, and physical rest requires stillness, and creative work requires uninterrupted space, the capacity for deep, sustained, empathic engagement requires replenishment. And replenishment looks different for every person, but it is never nothing. It never occurs by default. It never happens in the background while you continue at full capacity. It requires deliberate, protected, non-negotiable time and space that is devoted to a purpose that will never seem as urgent as whoever currently needs you, which is why it keeps getting deferred, and why the deferral has been making you disappear 1 degree at a time. Here is where this lands. Not with a neat resolution, because the kind of exhaustion this video is about did not arrive neatly, and it will not leave neatly. But with something true and useful and worth carrying. The 7 signs are not evidence that something is wrong with you. They are evidence that something real happened to you, gradually, through years of being someone whose depth of care exceeded the structures available to support it, and that the evidence has been written in the language of symptoms because you never gave yourself permission to name it in the language of cost. The relief when plans cancel is not antisocial. It is a nervous system running on a reserve. It has been running on for longer than reserves were designed to last. The mood reading is not a curse. It is a gift that has been operating without a switch, and what you need is not to remove the gift, but to find the switch. The apologizing for needs is not humility. It is the behavioral outcome of a belief you never consciously adopted and never had to. It was simply what the evidence seemed to keep telling you, until you stopped questioning it. The conversation replaying is not anxiety. It is care without a container. And what it needs is not suppression but direction. The forgotten wants are not gone. They are just quiet, waiting with the specific patience of things that have been waiting long enough to stop expecting to be heard soon. They are still there, and they will return when you make enough space for them. The tears at kindness are not weakness. They are the emotional equivalent of thirst. And what they are telling you is not that you are fragile, but that you are genuinely, measurably, profoundly undernourished in the specific area of being cared for. And the guilt for not doing more, even when you have given everything, that is the voice of a pattern that has confused your limits with your failures for long enough that the confusion has become comfortable. It is not comfortable. It has only been familiar. And familiar and comfortable are not the same thing. You are not someone who has failed at caring. You are someone who cared so completely, so continuously, so without exception, that the caring eventually ran past the edge of what one person, without adequate replenishment, can indefinitely sustain. That is not a flaw. That is a human being who was never told that the most generous thing they could do, for themselves and for every person who relies on the depth of what they give, is to finally, deliberately, without apology, treat their own restoration as something that cannot keep waiting. It has been waiting long enough. And so have you. If this reached something in you that has been waiting to be named, share it with someone you think might need to hear it. Not to fix anything. Just because some people are running on empty and silence, and the right words at the right moment change what feels possible.